Okay, so I'm going to try again. I've got cut off yesterday because I ran out of space. Look, we're spiritual beings in a body. Our thinking creates the reality around us, one way or another. And we're all connected. But of course, in recent times, like over the last 12 months, I've had to emphasize and add that that reality is not a reality in the sense that we are in a mind and physical controlled reality. So we control nothing, is what I'm saying. The matrix controls all. Some of us are under the delusion, and I'm not one of you, that we have some input into the matrix. Well, of course, it's not a delusion because, as I've said before, it's not a delusion in the sense that we are the source of the matrix, but we have no control over the matrix. We're in something we have no control over, so therefore, although we are the source power of the matrix, that power will be used against us, not for us, because a matrix can only keep going at low frequency. So if you're under the delusion that you can affect the matrix, well, I would say only in a negative manner, because if you are in a system and a house, shall we say, that is technically controlled, like supposing I'm in a house and it's technically controlled in every way. Every gadget in that house has control over me. Every gadget, like theoretically speaking, every gadget in the house could be a weapon. In other words, if I get too uppity and say, hey, I am the controlling frequency of the matrix, I am going to make the matrix frequency rise higher, the TV could probably come at me. The dog certainly can, as you know. That's not a joke, actually. I try to make light of these things, but they are not funny. They're not funny at all, because it is no joke. I'm getting angry now, and that's bad. That's negative for the matrix. That's negative for the matrix. Even making a video, you're making it for the matrix as much as for anyone else. Do not be deceived into thinking that you, I would say, but don't forget I am feeling it. Some of you will not be feeling it as much. Even in my head right now, like I'm not clear, because the physical frequency is around me. And I'm frequency, so I'm controlled by a negative frequency. Now, some people are more controlled by this frequency than others. So this is where deception comes in, I would say. This is where you get under the illusion that you're living in a Hansel and Gretel fairy tale, but you're not going to be shoved into the oven by the wicked old witch. Well, you will be. But, that is the reality. That is the reality. Now, the only reason I say that, and you must think my videos are all over the place. Well, of course they am, because I'm all over the place, because I'm in a mind control matrix, and the matrix has got the upper hand, especially on me and especially on some people. Depends on your position, where you are, where you live, how many negative things you have around you, how many psychopaths you have around you. I would say I'm going to go on to that again about this psychopath thing, because I've said many times the psychopath, the narcissistic psychopath, holds the key to the matrix in many ways. I know it holds the key to my life in the sense that, if you are surrounded by negative people who are of a particular personality type, they will persist without any reservation to bring your frequency down by any means possible. And that is because they are the scorpion. and the parable. The scorpion will defeat itself and you if necessary. A bit like someone that, for that end, because they're single-minded. They're one-eyed. They're a representation of this earth and this world and those that are the minions of the God entity. The God entity's mindset is represented 100% by the personality types on this earth, because this is what has happened to this individual, if you would like to use that word, but it is not a human individual the same as, say, myself, I wouldn't think, okay? But it is still a living being. I was about to say a living being, but this is certainly what it would have originally been if, yes, we go back to the garden and back to the fantasy story, because I'm going to keep using that as an example of a representation of what is now on the earth and what has led to it, or what is the appropriate fairy tale that fits the scenario, because it's the only one I could find that fits the scenario, okay? Because I'm not of any particular beliefs. I'm very ignorant of most denominations, as I've said before, know very little. Repeating myself again, but going off the track a bit. Yes, if you understand the psychopath, you understand the God entity. You understand the being and its minions and disciples and representatives in every single form on this earth. You understand the God entity, and therefore you will understand why the world is the way it is, whether you think it is good or bad, but certainly it is a world of contradictions at the very, very least. This is because you are dealing with an unstable mind. Go back to the garden. Go back to the story. It comes to me just day to day. I'm going to add to this story, and I will change it if I have to, even, because it's a fairy tale and it's my fairy tale, so I can do that. And you don't have to agree with all fairy tales. You take what you want from them. That's if and I have to be quick on these videos because I never know if it's going to be the last video I make. And I must be feeling a bit frantic at the moment because I'm forcing myself to try and make some under rather negative circumstances. But, I would like to be able to represent what I consider to be my kind, the real human kind. But instead I'm a poor representative, whereas, as I've said before, the God entity has its representations, and they are very superior and everything that is human and that I should be representing and talking about, they represent. But they are actors. They don't really feel that, they don't really think that, and even if they do, it comes from a negative source. It's like when you're in love with a psychopath. I might say, I'm loving and I care about this person and I want to do everything for them and I will follow them to the end of time. But, you're essentially following a person, if you follow a psychopath, that, that dislikes you, that wants your destruction, that has no value, that sees no value in you at all. And any good qualities that you have will be squashed, and they will attribute those qualities to themselves, even though they don't really feel them and don't really have them, and actually dislike those qualities. In other words, if you're a loving, kind person, the psychopath will present itself that way and probably present you as less than that. But they have no love or kindness in them at all. They actually think those are weak, pathetical attributes. Because even the God entity is essentially a god of, like I say, much more a god of war, really. But, It could well convince many others to go to war in the name of peace, as I've said before. That's pretty much how it works. But there are others who actually will agree with, who will openly agree with things. So it's all a matter of opinion, of course. I'm rambling on here and gone off the track. But I've said before, the psychopath holds the key to the matrix in many ways. It shouldn't, but it does because of the numbers. Because of numbers. Not about power, not about abilities, not even about frequency. Well, it is about frequency because if you have a few people who have potential to raise frequency, but you have minions who are psychopathic in personality, who do not like high frequency or high frequency individuals, they will combine to work against you. If you are a potential high frequency individual, they will set their task to work against you to make sure that your frequency is kept low, one way or another. And they are single-minded and one-eyed like the God entity. So that will be their sole purpose in life. They won't be interested in anything else. You know, they're not like you and me where we might have many interests and we don't just focus on one single thing for our entire existence. In fact, we want to make just our existence a bit better. They're not even interested in making their own existence better. Their existence exists on making your existence miserable. That is their sole aim. That is their soul. That is their buzz. That is their high. That is what turns them on. That is what raises their frequency, if you want to look at it that way. But I doubt that they actually have any frequency potential. They do not have a frequency potential for the matrix. They have no frequency potential for the matrix. They cannot raise the frequency of the thing, but they can bring it down by their physical activity, by their negativeness towards a potential high frequency real human being. That's how it works. And because their numbers are like about, I don't know what the numbers would be. How could I? How could I know how the full matrix works even? Of course I don't. I'm a limited, suppressed human being of low frequency and deliberately kept that way. Because the more your frequency, the more you see, the more you will know, the more you will understand the matrix and what the matrix is, and you know, maybe even how to leave the matrix if you wish to, because I can't imagine why any of us would want to stay. But of course there is also that delusion or dream that you can change the matrix, that you can turn it into a higher frequency. Well, look, that is probably what was meant to be. But, you know, like I say, we're towards the end of a World War III, and, you know, I don't know how other people's world is. I only know my own domain. And but I did say it's still hanging by a thread. You see, I don't look at the positive. I look at the negative that comes against things, and that's how I come to my conclusions. So I don't have to do much thinking. I just have to say, if you have say I see a human being, right? And like I say, I see that human being is basically a non-player in this world, shall we say, if you want to look at it that way. In other words, they seem to have no input into anything, and, you know, I'm talking about frequency and stuff here, but this is the deception of this world, that non-player that has no real input into the world, that may have no physical influence, you know, like I say, they're not actually you know, like I'm making a video now, but supposing I wasn't making a video, supposing which was exactly before I made the video anyway, like I was a non-player, okay? I didn't do anything in the world. I didn't associate with many people. I wasn't part of any groups or any community sort of stuff in any way. basically a loner that kept to myself pretty much. Even though I live in a mind-controlled, massive city. Of course, even that, I didn't realise how vast it was till I saw The Matrix either, because even in a city you can get used to it and you don't realise how engulfing that city can become. You don't realise the potential that city has for destructiveness either, because I'm going to get confused here again, and I'm getting disgusted with myself already, because you see, you get so many thoughts at one time when you're like myself and some others, no doubt. You get a lot of thoughts at once, and you have to express one at a time, and you lose another thought while you're expressing it. That's what happens to me, because I don't have a script, you see, unlike the Matrix players who have it all nicely written out, so they can just go and flow from one thing to another, and they're not affected by the Matrix, so they're not got one ear blocked up and planes going over and distractions, and their body probably feels it in a very healthy, comfortable way. But either way, I've gone off the track and trying to point out the reality of this thing, but I'm not doing it very well. Yeah, so my conclusion come to where you see non-players being brought down by the Matrix, and you say, well, why would you bother? Like if someone was old and they've only got a limited time to go and they have no input, like, why bother? Well, you could say, oh, well, they're an easy mark, so why not just get rid of them out of the Matrix? But you see, it doesn't really work like that, because that isn't what happens either. It is a frequency control system. So it is, and that's where you start to realise. And if you see it firsthand, once you understand it's a matrix, and you see even how humans, psychopathic humans, are utilised by the matrix to keep the frequency down of other human beings. That is, if you're not being brought down in other ways. Everyone's circumstances will be different. And that's where the matrix also is more deceptive, and that's why some people don't see the matrix too, because if you only see it as a personality clash, then that's what you'll centre on, which is exactly what I did before I saw the matrix, before I realised I was in a matrix. I only saw that I had been surrounded by negative personality types most of my life, the few that had been in there, and that they, and then when I come to that conclusion, after information, I already knew that I was dealing with negative personalities. As I said, I just didn't know they were called a psychopath, as I said before, or a narcissistic person. It depends on the degrees, but most of them, when they do expose themselves, you actually start to realise that even what you thought was narcissistic people are actually very similar to psychopaths, and they may not actually physically kill you, like we tend to think a psychopath might actually physically kill you, but in their mindset is still the same. They want you gone. They want you at the lowest level. They want you defeated as a human being, which is death. They want to kill your spirit. And as I've said before, we're spiritual human beings. So a narcissist or a psychopath wants to kill you as a human being, which is exactly the aim of the God entity and its minions and this matrix. Because it is a drainer of that, a user of that spirit. It's not meant to be a matrix where high spirit or high frequency rules the earth. It is a low frequency domain, and I did try to put a possible scenario on that with the Garden of Eden, and even when I mentioned limbo, which I'd heard that years and years ago, but did not ever, it's like as though it's some sort of in-between realm, between heaven and hell sort of thing, and that could well be it too. Certainly I would say, My own feeling about it, it's only a feeling, it's not even because I don't understand those things. It's more that, this matrix is potential hell, but it is limbo also because it it has spiritual beings in it, in a very limited number now, I would say, because we're towards the end of World War III. So that's why the psychopath now rules the world, even in the human numbers. And they work for the Matrix whether they know it or not. They are Matrix disciples even though they are not paid and rewarded as openly and as much as what they would like by the Matrix. They're not. They're really they don't even have to do too much to the psychopath to get them to work for them, because they're natural negative beings that just instantly will see a spiritual human being and say, and it'll be like bees to honey. They'll just be like, zoom in and I'm going to get that. I'm going to bring that frequency down. They don't know they're bringing the frequency down. They don't know that doing that is bringing their whole world down. They think they're only bringing down one human being when they do that. They live, I would imagine this. I would imagine that most of the ones that are like, say, in my world, in the more less affluent world, shall we say, in the sense that, like we're not millionaires living in mansions, we're not the elite disciples of the Matrix, shall we say, we're you know what I mean? But anyway, I've gone off here. But I'm trying to get track here, because to talk about these individuals sums up the mindset of the God entity, but it also shows how difficult it is. We'll put it this way. Let me say this, and this is what I've experienced too, so I know it to be true. I've seen it with individuals, with narcissistic, psychopathic individuals, right? Now, I talk about the Matrix and all this, stuff. We live in a Matrix, this and that. There's a God. I might, let's just say that if I talk to a psychopath about the Matrix and different things that go on, this person could actually say to me, yes, we live in a Matrix. Yes, there are a lot of negative things going on. Yes, there is things are being controlled in certain ways, and yes, we live in system. And they might even agree with me. This is the irony of the Matrix. There are psychopathic seekers of truth, even, if you want to look at it that way, which is kind of ridiculous, you'd probably say. But you see, they're not really. They are the same as, and this is where we get tricked, because they are the same as those that don't. Because, yes, they may speak truth even, but they don't really believe that truth. And they don't care for that truth. Because they're single-minded. They're like the one-eyed God. They're purely about destruction of high frequency in whatever form it takes. And it only takes the form of a real human being. Because the real human being is the centre of all. But in this matrix, it is the lowest life form there is. Because it is suppressed and kept down, because that is how the matrix keeps going, as I've said before. I'm having difficulty here because the place smells awful, because the dog is low frequency and he likes to poo everywhere. And I find it very hard to keep it up and to keep it. I can't clean the floors even though I have OCD. I like things to be germ-free, but instead I'm surrounded by massive germs. You see, this is an example of keeping the frequency down. Well, you say, well, why don't you clean it up? I'm saying, well, I haven't got the energy to clean it up because the matrix depletes me. It's a continual battle. It's like what should be an easy life is a hard, low-frequency life, continual. And then you don't want to get angry. You know, you don't want to, like I say, get angry with the dog for doing these things. Because you know at a conscious level that the dog is mind-controlled. Because it's very easy to mind-control animals. A lot of people might not agree with this. Because maybe your animal might not be mind-controlled. Yet. I say yet, because the potential is there. This is a matrix. Everything has the potential to be controlled. You know. And let's just say it's like this, right? You know, I buy a free-range chicken, right? A free-range chicken for the dog. I buy it for the dog. I should buy it for myself. I buy it for a mind-controlled negative dog that works against me and works for the matrix, okay? This is because he's been taken over, you know. The original dog was a spirit dog, I think, but I don't know that 100% sure because it's not my dog, okay? So, you know, so I'm not to know if it was born an original spirit dog and then was just taken over at some point. Of course, there is more to this than what I'm going to go into. Now, you might say, well, why doesn't she tell us all? Well, I don't know all. And also, I could talk only about animals. This may or may not apply to humans. I would have to say that anything that applies to an animal does apply to a human. Look, it applies to me. It may not apply to all humans. And how far do people take? How far do you take things in the matrix? You know, like if something can be done to an animal, can it be done to a human? I would say, why not? But, you know, you don't know because it is a mind control matrix too. It's a physical thing. Now, I've gone off the track here. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Oh dear. Let's leave the dog alone then, okay, for a second. The matrix can control anything. Make no mistake about that. If you don't think it can, like I say, you can have spiritual animals, you can have spiritual human beings. You can have non-spiritual animals, you can have non-spiritual human beings. It just depends on how much you're taken over, how much possession. An animal can be possessed, humans can be possessed. Mentally, physically, and many ways. Some of us are fighting against these negative forces even though they are overwhelming. You know, you want to go almost to the dark side for safety and for comfort because the fight is too great. Because you know that it's not, that generally speaking, it's not a battle that can be won. You know, like I say, it could be. You know, I say it's hanging by a thread, like I said before. That is only because the numbers are vast in opposition, as I've said before. Vast. But if you have more powerful beings up against essentially non-beings, you don't need to have vast numbers. The God entity knows this. But you have to have very vast numbers if you have nincompoops, shall we say. Shouldn't have said that. You know, if you've got a vastly super intelligent, super genius mind up against a nincompoop, then you're going to need an awful lot of nincompoops to defeat the vastly superior mind. You're going to need a lot. And you're not going to have mind capacity, you're just going to have numbers, and you're going to have information and technology. Once again, we come back to that. You're going to have technology. In fact, you may not even need advanced technology. That's an interesting point. I think the Matrix has very advanced technology behind the scenes and even in our world that we know of. But it really isn't essential not to defeat a human being, because any technology can be a weapon. And we live in a matrix, and human beings are spiritual, but they're in a physical body that can be attacked physically at a frequency level by a quite limited technology, because it is a frequency war. A frequency can be controlled very easily. You don't have to be a master genius if you just understand that. And certainly the God entity and that runs this matrix, that controls and operates and is the mastermind behind the matrix, knows all this. If all human beings knew this, which they should, but like myself, it's been kept from us. And even if we were told it, we still wouldn't probably understand that. We'd probably say, I probably would have said a few years ago, if you'd have said the frequency thing, I'd have said, oh, well, that's interesting, but that's okay. If it's just a matter of being happy, I want to be happy anyway. Yeah, that'll be fine. But you don't know that if you still don't know that you're in a matrix that is a negative frequency matrix that is operated that way, then you've got to realise that it's a frequency tug of war, a continual push and pull of frequency against the human being, because the human being is unaware that they're in that tug of war. And even if you are, then the frequency will be stronger. Then the matrix will openly show its frequency. Whereas while you are unaware and your frequency, like for instance, I just use an example, like if I was not in the position I was in, if I wasn't in a tug-of-war frequency with the matrix, and if I wasn't aware of the matrix, like I wasn't, a few years ago, and a few years ago is exactly correct, I think it's just a real world type of thing. My frequency would essentially be monitored by the matrix still, but, I wouldn't be aware of that. But they would be aware of the psychopathic personalities around. They would bring those into my life. And it's not very hard to bring them into your life because their minions are everywhere. Because their numbers are much greater. This is a point that that cannot be stressed enough, because, like I say, I don't know what the numbers are, but that's not the point. In fact, there was actually, I should just mention this before I continue on with the video. There was actually someone who left a comment on one of my videos back, and I've tried to find it, about when I was talking about this frequency. And like I say, they put it into a few paragraphs, everything that I say over hours and hours and ramble and, get muddled up all over the place. They put it very concisely, I thought, into a couple of paragraphs. I did not get their name, and I did not get to read the whole thing as well as what I wanted, because I saw it there after I had done the video and said, I'm going to get back and study that and have a good look at that thing. I did read it, but I didn't even read the whole thing because I couldn't, because the mobile was playing up. And what happened was, immediately afterwards, I lost the internet for a whole month. under various circumstances, which I won't go into, but essentially I couldn't then look at the comment or get the name of the leaver of the comment. I think the first name was Franco, but that was all I could remember because I saw that the first two bits of it were really what they call hitting the nail on the head. In other words, putting what I was saying very succinctly and with great clarity. But I am going to, and since I've got the thing back, the comment seems to have disappeared. So I guess that maybe they deleted it because I didn't get back or so. But like I say, that's the matrix for you, and that's also muddled up me for you. But either way, it shows that some people do understand those things even more than me, because I understand it, but I kind of also don't understand it, because even though I come to these conclusions a fair while ago, like by that I mean maybe a year or something like that. That's not a real long time, but at any rate, I still don't, like I say, I know that our connections are not good. And this is what this person was saying, that some people's connections are good to another human being, a bit like being psychic, you could almost, I suppose. But also, if you're not aware of it, look, it's an interesting thing. But I am going to say, before I lose track again, and I don't know if I'm putting this right as usual. And as you can see, I'm low frequency the way I'm doing this. I should be, I'm laughing, but it's really not funny. But you almost have to laugh because it is, because like I say, the situation is hopeless but not serious. But actually, I don't know. Really, see, it's one thing to say a situation is hopeless and not serious, but when you're talking about it's a burden to think of it as being a whole world or a human race. Like I said, I've never been, I don't like to see the extinction of species on this earth. Any animal species, I'm always upset, even if it's an animal that I don't particularly like. Like maybe I'm not that keen on snakes and crocodiles, but I wouldn't want to see them extinct. And sharks, when they were getting rid of sharks at some point in the past, I remember I would be fearful of a shark, but they were actually culling them because of a few incidents. That's the matrix, of course. You have to have a reason to get rid of something, but, if people agree with it, if people are fearful and they agree with something, someone gets taken by a shark, they say, oh yeah, wipe out the sharks, or cull a large number in a specific area where an incident has taken place. Most people don't object because they're fearful. They're like, hey, we want to go in the water. We can't now. The sharks, yes. If the Matrix says get rid of the sharks so you can safely swim in the water, they say, oh, thank you, Matrix. They don't realise that that is a species that has been around a long time and that it serves a purpose. And should you wipe out a whole species just because one human being has been taken? Probably isn't even a spiritual human being that's been taken anyway. It could be, because the Matrix sometimes, like I say, is what am I talking about? Going off the track again and going around in circles. I was told the other day, every time I open my mouth, I've been told, like, get back on your hamster wheel. That's right, just get back on your hamster wheel. I thought that was kind of amusing, but also very distressing, because it's like saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're going round in circles. Get on your hamster wheel. We're laughing at you for all your talk about this, that, and everything. When you get back on the hamster wheel, like, we're not listening. We find it irritating. You're just a little mouse on a hamster wheel, rambling and raving. We don't care if you make sense, and we're laughing at you because you're just going around. And basically, that's what was was, and there's truth to that, unfortunately. But what else can you do? But at any rate, I was about to finish the video yesterday, and I thought I had something to say, like about this frequency and this connection to the earth, shall we say. I'm trying to put this right, and I don't even fully understand it. But it's like this. I'm going to put it as arty as I can, but I will not find a good example. So you'll have to bear with me, but look, I'll just say it this way as best I can. I was saying yesterday, I thought I had it clever, that it was going to be... Look, I'm a grain of sand, right? You're a grain of sand. We're all grains of sand on a beach. Well, just grains of sand, if you like. And there are billions and billions and billions of grains of sand. Enormous. But let's just say that on this earth, obviously there are more grains of sand than what there are living things, living beings, and much less spiritual beings. But we're all grains of sand, literally, but really it's symbolically, okay, but it's physically too. But it works at a physical and a spiritual level. I think the physical and the spiritual kind of work together. They're certainly utilised and manoeuvred by the matrix very strongly, because I'm defeated more by the physical at the present time than by the spiritual. Like in my own head, I'm quite clear on things in some ways, but the spiritual brings me down. Because even if you say you're clear in your head and then your head has got a headache, or you're attacked by, like I was attacked, and I say attacked because they are attacks, but they're physical attacks, whichever way you want to look at it. If you don't believe in all this stuff, you say, well, yes, okay. I had never experienced a migraine ever in my life, and I didn't even know what a migraine was a few years ago. And I wondered what was going on. This was before the Matrix. This is before I knew about the Matrix. So obviously, like I say, the Matrix is always there. It's just that you're not aware of it. But, and I didn't buy into this migraine idea even then. Even like people said, oh yeah, we can all get migraines. Some people get them really bad. I knew that. But I knew it was not really me. I knew that I was not a migraine sufferer. I knew that I was not meant to get a migraine. But of course I also was aware at a conscious level that my migraines were brought on by psychopathic people. I was consciously aware of that at the time. I knew that it wasn't a physical anomaly, shall we say. I knew that it was not... I knew I was bringing it on myself because of my contact with the narcissistic world by individuals. That I knew my spirit was being taken from me, even though I didn't think I was a spiritual human being at that time. I knew that my identity, my essence of myself, was being attacked and drained. In other words, if you're a person that likes to be a bit free, say, and someone says, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, I'm going to tell you, then you become aware that your freedom is being taken from you. And then that becomes important. You're like, hey, but that is important to me. You see, that's how the psychopath works. And so then I got extreme migraines, like just out of the blue. And, I wasn't sure if there was some sort of mind thing where you might think, oh, I've got some sort of tumour, all this sort of stuff you don't know. But you know that it's wrong and that it's not meant for you. And you see it as an attack. But you see it as an attack by another human because you don't know there's a matrix at that time. But you know that, if you've never vomited in your life and you vomit in the street, You know there's something wrong because you know you have a cast iron stomach, you know, and you know that you've never experienced headaches ever in your life, much less a migraine. Um, you know, and you know that your circumstances have changed. You know you're surrounded by negative people, and you can see what they're doing. And that's when you become aware of that there are different personality types, because some narcissists are deceptive, some psychopaths are deceptive, most are. They will present the opposite to what they are. They'll be a smooth operator, shall we say. They will not expose their negative side. Whereas if you come in contact with a negative psychopath narcissist that actually exposes itself completely to you, that is a curse and a blessing in one, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is an exposing psychopath. And basically, yes, I've known psychopaths all my life. It's just that the ones that I knew didn't expose it directly. They didn't say directly to your face, oh, I wish you were dead. Oh, I'm not interested in you. I'm going to defeat you. I'm going to be negative in every way against you. Any little bright idea you get that might enlighten your life, or that might make you a little bit happy, or any activity that makes you smile a little bit, I'm going to make that a misery. But they're openly doing it, whereas in the past it was people that did it behind your back or more deceptively, only occasionally expose their true persona, and you'd usually probably forgive them, even because you might say, oh, well, that person's isn't really mean 100%. They've just got some negative things from their past. Maybe they've had a terrible experience, maybe they've had a rough time in the last few years. Maybe their upbringing and all these things are true. Maybe their upbringing has not been positive, and all these things are true. But like I say, that is an excuse too, and it's an excuse that we can all use, and it's an excuse I've used. But how negative does it make you? Does it make you? It's going to make all of us a bit negative, right? So we're all going to be doing negative things. But some people, it turns them into total monsters, 100%, to where there's really very little positive, and they don't want to be positive. They don't even want to make their own life better. They just want to make yours a misery. That is essentially the game of the narcissist, the psychopath, and the God entity and the minions. That is this Matrix Earth's game for the human being in order to keep the frequency low, so the matrix stays as it is. And the reasons for that, who knows? They can't live in a high frequency world. These same people will be talking about wanting a high frequency world, wanting a peaceful world, but they don't, because you can't have that if you bring down the high-spirited real human beings. They know that. So it's a game. It's a false fairy tale game, just as much as my fairy tales. It's all a fairy tale. But either way, I'll run out of space here before I say the thing that I've been trying to say for a few videos. Right, okay, so we're a grain of sand. We're all grains of sand. There's all these grains of sand, right? There's a billion grains of sand. There's billions of grains of sand. And then there is the water that comes in contact. The tide comes in, and it comes in contact with the grains of sand on the beach. The tide comes in. It rolls over the grains of sand. Human beings are like grains of sand. There are most grains of sand have no frequency. They're dead. They're just grains of sand. But there are other grains of sand that have a frequency. And when the tide comes in and it hits all those grains of sand, it's basically not affected. The water is not affected by most of the grains of sand. Now, perhaps this is not a good example, but supposing you had a bigger rock, you could figure it out that if the tide comes in and it hits the bigger rock, it's going to cause a bit of a ripple. It's going to change the water. It's going to make the water move faster or whatever. But anyway, it doesn't make any sense, but I'm just going to put it simply that, there are positive and negative grains of sand, let's say, right? If the water hits the negative grains of sand, very little happens. But when the water hits a positive grain of sand, like a high frequency human being, it causes a ripple in the water. That water is the earth, the world. This is just figuratively speaking, making something arty out of something that is really just a practical thing, but it is a practical thing. But it's like that. And let's just say that, like that person that left the comment and like some of the stuff I say, there are probably some grains of sand that have the potential to cause a tidal wave. Most just cause a ripple. But there are some that could literally cause a tidal wave. And that tidal wave then washes over the earth. And nourishes the soil, feeds the flowers and the trees and all the nature, and it grows and flourishes. And then you have a high frequency, beautiful, natural earth world. And you don't have a matrix. Nature is not part of a matrix. It is part of our matrix, but it doesn't belong in a matrix, because nature is natural. Of course it's natural, but it is not something that needs or is controlled by a matrix. It doesn't need a matrix. It can survive. And like I say, if it is nourished by water, needs very few simple things. It only needs other elements of nature to flourish. I don't know where I'm getting all this from. I'm making it up as I go along, but I hope it sounds as sensible as what I think it might make some sense. But it's an idea anyway. But it is a reality. Even though it's an idea, it is a reality. The matrix doesn't want any tidal waves, not unless they create them, and not unless they wipe out what they don't want. You know what I'm saying? They don't want a tidal wave of high frequency. They only want tidal waves that are negative, that destroy, which is like the matrix, because the matrix is a negative being. Go back to the garden. This being we have the creation. Back to the fairy tales again, back to the nursery rhymes, whatever you like, back to fantasy. But, I'm making it up, but I'm trying to put a scenario that relates to the world, okay? So it may or may not fit some people's idea of a Garden of Eden, because I haven't read the full thing, and it's probably pretty simple anyway, and I think we're probably allowed to elaborate a bit, but I'm losing energy here to actually get onto this story, and yet it's so important, I think. But this being that was in the Garden of Eden, I should like to put a name on it because it makes it easy when I have to elaborate and go, this being, this second to none, this creation, this was like Pinocchio. Certainly becomes like Pinocchio in the sense that it's like I'm going to be better than Adam and Eve. I'm going to do anything I can to show that I am better than that because I want my position back. But the reason it's being lost its position was because of iniquity, and that iniquity is an unbalanced mind. A mind that that's the best way I can put it, but I don't know what I'm talking about in the sense that to use the word balance is a bad thing too. But essentially, it's not a rational mind. It's not a mind that it's a one-eyed God mind. It is the mind of the psychopath, and this is what happened. Now, why this happened? Well, could it just simply be? Could it just simply be? We have a creator. Supposing we have a creator that creates anything and everything. When I say we, but just a creator, okay? Doesn't have to even be we because it may not apply to you. And it doesn't apply to a lot of people, obviously. Most people would probably say if we didn't happen randomly, but there must have been some creation. Now, can creation happen randomly? Some people believe that creation just happened out of thin air. Okay, that's all right if you want to believe that. I don't know. I don't really know anyway. But I'm going to go with a story that there was an intentional creation, that creation was not random or accidental or just, just happening by, molecules banging together. Because where do the molecules come from to bang together even? If you're talking about something banging, you have to have those things in the first place. Whereas, you can't create something out of nothing, can you? Or can you? Maybe you can, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to make sense. But either way, that's not really the point. We're going with the story of a creator, and I'm losing track here and off track again as usual. Now, supposing I'm a no, well, I won't suppose it's me. Supposing there is a creator, some form of creation, and that creator decides to create a being, but doesn't create that being from itself, creates it from something else. Oh dear. See, even I'm confusing myself. I'm like, what am I saying here? Look, if you don't know something, you just have to go with a bit of a story, right? But, I'm taking it from some sources a bit and elaborating because I don't really know how it all happens. I only know what I see now, okay? But either way, like you could have a couple of children even. You could have one black sheep amongst the children, couldn't you? You could have There was a movie I saw years and years ago. I still remember it now. It's called The Bad Seed. Just where a child was born basically bad. That was the premise of the movie. A very simple little old movie. And it was born of a bad seed because it was created by one positive force but one negative force. You had two people coming together. One was positive, the other was negative, and the child became the bad seed. It didn't inherit the good side. It wasn't about environment, in other words, which I very strongly believe, as you know, in environment, because that's the matrix. But there is also genetics, of course. But I don't understand all these things, so don't know what I'm talking about. But this movie went along the premise because this child had a very good environment. The mother loved the child greatly and gave it everything and was, yes. But that really didn't, and the child appeared to be sweet and whatever, but actually was like a psychopath, a total, on the outside appeared to be loving, kind and the sweetest child, but underneath was all self and very negative, and would eliminate, which it did do. It actually killed a little boy, even like it was only a little girl, like it was a little girl about 6, 7, 8 maybe, forget something like that, and it killed the little boy just because the little boy got something that she wanted and couldn't deal with it. And that is like the mind of the psychopath. Yes, this girl was a born psychopath, you could say, actually born through creation, through inept creation. Can a God create a being that is faulty? Can even a God, can even a creator create beings and then occasionally make a mistake to where something is not quite what the creator would have planned? Of course, there is free will in this world. We talk a lot about free will. I have said that myself. I haven't went on about it too much, but there is free will. And I would say that we live in a free will universe. This is another thing that people have said, a free will universe. Of course, there is no probably real universe as such. That is just a word. Because the world that we live in is not part of, well, it's part of it. It's not really part of a universe because it is a closed off system. But, is there a universe? Is what we think is the universe what it really is, or this or that? Well, who knows? There's no point in me pretending that I know something I don't. Now, I think we should know these things. As I've said before, I do feel that, that if it's true that we're limited and that is because we are cut off from information and knowledge and just our own awareness of what we are and where we are and kind of where we fit into things. This is all something that we have no idea from. I only know these things from the negativity I see. That's why I say, like, even a psychopath, I've learnt more from a psychopath, as much from a psychopath as what I would from a high spiritual human being. Because if I had talked to a high spiritual human being, assuming there's a few still around, I'm sure there are, but there would be very few in numbers, I wouldn't have, I would have not known the difference between that and a clever psychopath anyway. But also, if they'd have said stuff like I'm saying now, I'd have just thought it was all fairyland completely. And it is fairyland whichever way you look at it, because we live in fairyland. But I would have thought there was no merit to it. And I wouldn't have been interested. Whereas I would have been beguiled and enticed and seduced by a psychopath because they live in the real world, and that was the world that I lived in. So I would have, but I still learnt more from the psychopath, because once the psychopath, if you get a very negative psychopath, like I say, if you see negativity right in front of you and it's taking from you, it makes you very aware of what's important. So you haven't become good for the sake of being good. You haven't chased high frequency, but you've just been aware. This is my main thing. This is how I have seen the Matrix, is not by anything good, but by seeing negative, anti-life right in front of me. It's like, oh, this is what I don't want. I don't know how I get to the good stuff, and I don't consider myself a particularly good person. No, I wouldn't think so. Not especially now when I've become aware of this and I look back over my life, rather the reverse. You played with the Matrix, for the Matrix, and did more harm than good. And to realise it now at the closing stages, a little bit late almost, but and the Matrix has the upper hand. Like I can't be at high frequency right now if my head is sore. If I'm out, that's a physical thing that is a frequency caused thing by the Matrix. And, like I say, you don't need vast technology to defeat a human being, really. You may have that, but you actually don't need it if you have millions of psychopaths around, because you can get millions of psychopaths to use quite limited technology in a negative way. You know what I'm trying to say? It's a bit like that movie Duel. As I've said, that was just a single truck driver in a truck that had negative intent, that was a psychopath in personality and was being used by the Matrix to destroy a real human being just going home from, just trying to go home on a highway. Now, think about it this way. This truck driver and this big lorry was only one vehicle, and it nearly did defeat this innocent human being. And theoretically speaking, probably could have if they had made the movie a different way. But of course, it's a Hollywood movie, so the human did actually survive it. But it still showed how close this human came to being completely annihilated by just a single truck driver. Now, this is not high technology. This is using a simple vehicle as a weapon. And even that vehicle was not used at a high frequency level. It was used basically by intimidation, and of course, yes, it did use the power of the vehicle on occasion against the smaller car. But like I say, the smaller car should have been able to actually speed past it because it had more. It should have been, but that's not the point. Can you, for instance, imagine? That's right, that if you have negative human beings, psychopathic human beings, that have simple vehicles, for instance, but you have them in vast numbers, and they're all around. You go outside, and if vehicles are being driven by psychopaths, negative human beings who, whether they are consciously working for the Matrix or whether they are just negative human beings, but they are able to see a positive human being. But if they are a collective of the Matrix, which is also the case of many anyway, you don't need to have, you don't need to have guns. You don't need to have weapons as we know them, because, you could, a bit like I could use a physical example of my own situation. Like if you Like if you have, like I had a big, huge, big machines outside on the street because they were digging up the entire street. They literally ripped up the whole street almost, you could say, to put all these so-called pipes and things down for who knows what purpose. There again, you don't even know, and if you ask people, they can't really tell you. They give you some sort of loose explanation. But either way, the actual machine itself was going for hours and hours and hours, like about 9 hours every day at least. In fact, actually probably for more than 9 hours, more like 10 or 11 really, if I think of it, because it started very early in the morning and then went right through till the sun went down. Now, this machine was making a noise that was like it could almost make your house vibrate. Now, it was an unnecessary loud noise for the project they were doing. That is technology, innocent technology, you could say, although I would not describe it as innocent. But, it's going through the air, affecting the vibration of the human. Because the actual vibration, I don't know about all other people around me, but it's like the difference between if a car goes past you or a motorbike goes past you, and like I said, it could be an easy rider where it's just pleasantly riding along and you actually look at it and say, oh, that's nice to see people free on their bikes and driving around stuff. But if you get one that revs up the engine in an aggressive, mean manner, in an intimidating manner, to where it's like, I want to run you over, like this truck was doing in Jewel, where it was clearly intimidating and negative, even though it was not using noise in that particular movie. It was not using the vibration of sound or noise, no. It was using other techniques to make the human uncomfortable and frightened and full of fear. Basically, he became totally full of fear as it progressed. At first he was like, oh, this is a minor nuisance. That's another thing too, you can escalate things. This escalated. The same as with myself. I've noticed that in this world now things are escalating. Noise escalates. Sound escalates. A bit like the planes that go over my place. They used to go further over, so it didn't bother me. Now they're over the roof and they are, they're intimidating and they're noisy and they're low frequency. So that's an escalation of, that's only one thing, by the way, too. And, so it's an accumulation, and then fear takes over because you do feel that you're trapped in a negative matrix. And this is, and some people might say, well, it's mind over matter. You need to meditate to stop this. How can you meditate when you've got noise? I'll tell you, you could put earplugs in and you can still hear these noises. It's not as loud. But then again, my ear's infected, so I'm finding it hard to keep an earplug in. It's uncomfortable. It's full of pain when I put it in because of the vibration. See, vibration can cause physical injury because human beings are about vibration. And it doesn't have to be, it has to be loud, but also it doesn't have to be real loud. It has to be to a certain frequency. I don't understand these things. But the Matrix knows all these things. The Matrix is not brilliant, but it understands simple principles of the reality and of human beings, things that we just don't know. We don't know the very basics about what makes us tick. That's what it really comes down to. Just as we don't know the very basics of what it is to keep our body healthy. We will tend to go along with the Matrix, rightly or wrongly. I'm not saying that there aren't some positive things, because obviously, like I say, if you want me to be part of the Matrix, it can't all be negative. Well, it can be now, because if it gets exposed, because it's then like, hey, we don't care now, because, like that's the difference, I think, is that if the Matrix exposes itself and comes down, then it's like it's closed the gate. We no longer care for some individuals. they are not of the matrix, they have served their purpose, or they are serving their purpose now whether they like it or not. So we have full control of the matrix and of the high frequency, potential high frequency things. We're not going to have that tidal wave. No. You know, that grain of sand, that pathetic little grain of sand, if it thinks it's going to cause a ripple that will cause a tidal wave, no way. The only tidal waves that are created in the matrix are the physical ones that we create, and they will be to wipe out what we don't want. That won't be to nourish the soil and to grow trees and to that's not a matrix. Matrix doesn't like nature. A matrix is technology. At least that God is technology, because the God is, I think, like, this is just my fairy tale, but it's kind of like this. Go back to the garden again. That's if I've got any time left. Go back to the garden. Look, we had the Creator. It created a being that the Creator liked, loved, idolized, and there were other beings probably too, no doubt. This is how the story goes. They were probably created too, I would think. Okay, it must have come from somewhere. Don't ask me. This is a story, this is a fairy tale. But this particular being, like I say, despite appearances, did have iniquity in the sense that it became unrational for lots of reasons. I don't know what these reasons were. Different people might put a different story or a different yarn on it. Perhaps it was just created with a fault somehow. Can a God create something that is close to what they would think is close to perfect, but then is actually not, because it is created from the wrong material or something? Because there again, if you're a creator, it's a bit like if you're painting a picture. You might make a few pictures and you might discard some drawings because you don't think they're as good. A bit like these videos, I could pretty much wipe most of them because they're not what I want to really make. If I was trying to convince a person who, like myself, was not aware of a matrix or anything like it, I would say these are not suitable for that. So the purpose is lost. But that's not the purpose now, so it doesn't matter so much, unfortunately. But it would be nice if they actually covered both, really, to where... But anyway, you see what I'm saying? You can create things and then be realise that your creation wasn't quite what you thought. So, psychopaths are brought into the world, and in heaven, the same thing might well have happened, if you follow me, to where oh dear. But do you know what I'm saying? So this being had the iniquity, was psychopathic at some point. Maybe the creation of Adam, a more pure being that really should not have had iniquity, should not have had any psychopathic tendencies, if you like, and could not properly even, because it was created from a different material, a different essence, and that essence was from a more perfect source. Like I say, there's a difference between if you make something with your hands, like Pinocchio made of wood, as opposed to having and conceiving your own offspring. I've tried to use that example, but I don't know if it's any good. But so maybe then, like I say, like I said, all this, it's all in the world. You can see the mindset of the God entity, you can see the mindset of this being that was in heaven. If you just look at the results or the fruits, as some have said in some book or something, like you can tell what people are by their fruits generally. You can tell someone's mindset. I know that even from my own life. You can see what their life is by their mindset, what they are creating, what they're doing, and so that's but I'm trying to analyse this a bit, I suppose, and say, well, look, if you were number one in a family, say, and apply this to the Garden of Eden or to other scenarios, I should be putting this better, and I'm not. And then you have another child. You have a child that, sometimes this happens in families because that is the matrix. The God entity loves to show his own grievances, shall we say. That's the word. How he thinks, how it thinks, how it feels about, how it feels that it's been rejected and been relegated to second spot, how others are favoured, and this resentment, this bitterness comes through in many ways. And this happened from the beginning almost, if you take these stories to be true, or if you think there's potential for it. I certainly think there's potential in the matrix now. So that's why I'm going back to trying to find stories in the past that relate to it. But so you have a child or a creation, even if it's not of your flesh. Supposing you adopt a child or you've made a child out of a different material, and it's favoured and everyone loves it. And then you have a child of your own flesh, and this other child is resentful because it's like, oh, I can see that child is better and it's going to outshine me, shall we say. So like I say, Adam would not have had iniquity or a psychopathic tendency because it was created from a part of source, whereas the other was not. So it was susceptible. I'm just putting it this way, whereas it could just be born that way. It could be created, because it's a bit like my father used to say, like, some people are great while the going's good, and this being, while it was admired and worshipped and idolised by all, of course it had no reason then to show its darker side or to be psychopathic, because even psychopaths sometimes, if you idolise them and worship them, and the same with the narcissist, if you do everything for them but suppress yourself in the process, they're actually quite happy. They won't do you any harm at that point. They'll want you to stay limited, but they won't want to wipe you out, if you know what I mean. Whereas if you refuse to stay limited, then they will say, well, if this person doesn't stay limited, if they rise to their true potential, or they will outshine me. And they'll probably even discard me because they'll realise that I'm less and that I really have not really loving intentions towards them. So it'll be like that, like the psychopath. And this is essentially the scenario in this heaven kind of creation type of story, fairy tale, if you like. It's a bit like that. And like I say, the creation of a being, that not only was not psychopathic and able to perhaps outshine this being, but also then the potential of the mate that was even more at a physical level, because if your main attribute is also seducing by your physical persona, shall we say, and then someone comes along that is more beautiful and has an even more striking persona, well, that is taking from you also, because it's all comparative, isn't it? I'm not putting this very well. I may need to fold up because I've lost the track and the incentive, and I just get disgusted that I can't put these videos correct. I just don't feel very good, you see, that's the whole thing. So it's one thing to say there's a negative world, but if you feel physically good in yourself, that's why I say the Matrix is like that. But yes, whichever way you look at it, I've gone back off onto the Matrix as opposed to this story, but because I'll have to finish it up another time, because I feel that there is a kind of bottom line story to it, but I haven't got it figured out yet, or I just can't concentrate enough to put the story very clearly. I'm not quite sure really, because it's trying to figure out the mindset of a god or a demigod or a creation that is damaged, a damaged creation. You're trying to find out the mindset of a damaged creation that has become a god or a demigod that controls and operates and has mastery over the human. This is a human matrix. A human maximum security, mind-controlled, insane mental institution, prison, if you like, if you want to look at it that way, for a human being. Now, the reason it's mainly that for a human being as opposed to those that are less or of a lower frequency is because the human is the controller of the frequency. Like I say, that piece of sand, you have so many grains of sand on the beach, but most of them are negative. So they have no power to cause a ripple when the tide comes in. Whereas there are some out there that have the potential to cause a tidal wave, as I said. And even a ripple will still affect the water, because it's all about affecting the water, because the water is like the frequency of the whole earth, shall we say. That's the representation in the example. And the earth, I'm guessing this, of course, the earth frequency, like if you have, because even negative, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong about this, and it doesn't matter either way, because even if you have negative grains of sand, supposing the vast number of grains of sand are negative, if you change the frequency of the tidal wave, and if you change the frequency of the water, I'm losing myself. You change the frequency of the water, and it becomes a tidal wave, and then when it gushes back in, when it flows back over the sand, and it's been charged with high frequency, then even the negative grains of sand have the potential for a higher frequency. They can be changed. Because maybe the negative grains of sand are more neutral, I don't know. Maybe they have the potential to go one way or the other. I don't know. I'm making this up, as you can see. But maybe they have the potential to go one way or the other. But they can't do it themselves. It has to be affected by the positive grains of sand. I'm likening that to real humans. So only real humans have that ability, that power, that frequency, or that potential for that frequency to change the water, and the water can change the land, and the land changes the entire earth. And then Because don't forget, a lot of people too will go with the flow. Like they will go with whatever is. I'm not making any sense here. I tried to be flowery. I tried to be make it fancy and artistic, shall we say, and somehow or other it doesn't make any sense because I overstepped my own storytelling ability there. And I really would prefer to make complete sense. You know, once you go into these airy-fairy things too much, then you lose the point of your discussion, shall we say, or the point of the fairy tale. Because you see, I don't know the mindset. I know how a psychopath thinks because I see it in reality. But I don't know if all psychopaths are. I know that they are in vast numbers, but I don't know how infected they are. I don't know how. I know there is possession. And I know this is a spiritual kind of thing. But you see, I'm in the dark like everyone else. I only see the results of things. And if you don't see something, it makes it very hard to say this is what is happening. You're putting, it's, in fact, it's probably quite simple underneath all of this. Like I say, like I mentioned, the technology. There is much more to things. We're talking about creation here. We're talking about doing things that a human being doesn't do these things. But we do things by frequency and by thinking. But we're in a world that also does things, but it does things by different means, I would think. You know, I don't, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, because we wouldn't be a necessary cog, would we, I suppose. That's how a lot of people have said that, you know, we like a necessary evil almost to the Matrix, but still something they need, you know. Still something they need, but they have their own means. But this being from the beginning, you know, had to find its own means, I would imagine, to try to rise up again to a higher level again. But if you're dealing with different species, almost you could say, different species will probably use different means to accomplish the same purpose. If you follow me, I don't follow what I'm saying myself, but you know, like a human being, because it is from a source creator, if you like, but they don't know that, and we've lost that ability, or we're out of touch with it all, and we're in a matrix, etc., a negative frequency world. You know, what is very simple for us, or should be simple for us, simple creation, simple frequency, it's technology. Technology really is us, frequency. That is our technology. It is a natural thing that we have that is inbuilt. We don't need anything more. We can do anything with what we already have. But a lesser being that doesn't have this, that is a different species, will have to use external means, will have to find artificial means, technology, to try to accomplish the same things, to try, and particularly if it is resentful, of a resentful nature, feels that it has been wronged. Look, the narcissist is like this, the psychopath is like this. I have known psychopaths, and this is why I say this is the God entity's mindset. I have known them. They feel wronged. They feel the world is against them, but it is them that is against the world. They feel that people hate them. They feel that people wish them harm. They feel that circumstances and individuals have tried to, out of jealousy and resentment and envy, tried to bring them down. Whereas in reality, in all the circumstances I have seen dealing with it, it is always the reverse, because we live in a reverse world. It is always them that have created every negative situation, and then it's woe is me, look at what you've done. Look at the evil people it's always someone else's fault, it's never theirs, and yet they set up, as this matrix world sets up every situation to cause negativity, and then it's woe is me, I am the victim. And actually you hear me saying that too. But that's the confusion of this world. That is how this world gets away with it. This is how the matrix gets away with it, because you can't tell the difference between the real victims and the victims who have caused all the bad stuff. They brought it onto themselves and to everyone else, because their intention is always to destroy others. But usually in trying to destroy others because of some sort of karma or something, it usually comes back at them 10 times more. And then they're like, oh dear, that person has wished me ill, that person has done this. It's never them. And yet if you look at the actual story, the actual reality of what happened, if you're involved, you'll see quite clearly, especially if you know them very closely and you've watched them move with every person, you know that they have set it up. And always the intention has been out of envy and the idea to bring someone down, to limit that person, to take from that person. You never want that other person to be happy or to have what makes them content. Because I've seen psychopaths, right, that don't want to mate themselves. They don't like human beings, most of them. They're like the God entity. They actually don't like human beings. They don't like their own kind, really. For instance, just a very practical example is this, right? Okay. I like dolls, okay? I've said I like dolls. So I buy a doll, or someone gives me a doll. The psychopath doesn't like dolls. There's no need of a doll, doesn't want a doll, but doesn't want me to have a doll just the same. He'll probably find a way so that I don't get the doll, or will take the doll from me, or will, a bit like what did happen with Lulu, the Archon spirit doll, when I was a child. There again, I'm rambling and going back into the past. I shouldn't have ever brought that up, really. But it's the same thing, because those were psychopathic narcissists. They didn't like the doll, they didn't want a doll themselves, but they didn't want me to be happy having a doll. So it was envy of the doll and wanting something. In fact, if they took the doll from you, they'd just shove it in the garbage truck or in a cupboard and never look at it. Whereas to you, it had a value, you see. Even though you shouldn't really value a doll or a piece of plastic too much. But when you're a child, it's okay, I think, you know. You keep doing it when you're grown up, which is what we do in a way. But also I had control over that, as I've said before, so I don't see that as so harmful, because now what we put our spirit into, and our admiration and our personalities even, is not something we control. You know, we now give to the matrix, whereas I gave to the Lulu Archon spirit doll, but that was only my spirit, and I had control over that doll. You know, it's just that's not a good example, but you see what I'm saying. And it's anything that you at least is part of is a choice and a consensual part of you, and something that you only control. You know, something that you only control. That's not such a bad thing, because that's that's like the ventriloquist with his dummy. That's just it shouldn't be necessary, but it's just a bit of fun, you know. It's Not making any sense here. Going to have to fold up, I think. I hope I put something in there that made some sense, but I only see like I say, the grain of sand, the potential for a tidal wave, the potential for a ripple that could cause a tidal wave. I only see that, putting it artistically, if I can do so, as what I see in the reality, not even a story, a reality of where human beings are suppressed and are kept down and put down just by others even around them, even at a psychopathic level. Even the psychopath now rules and is the majority. So therefore, that is an indication that even at a very small level, yes, that even at a very small level, yes, those people beeping their horns could well be of a psychopathic nature. They could be, because their intention is, I want to be noticed. You beep your horn because you want to be noticed. It's an aggressive negative frequency when you do it, and that's a very minor thing. It's nothing in comparison to the other frequency of like the mechanical great big thing that can send vibrations through streets and literally. I mean, sound can be a very destructive frequency if it's the right frequency for a human being, because while we're in this, because the human body is a natural thing that would have a certain frequency, I would think, and because in a natural world everything is in harmony, but in an unnatural technical world, simple things can be turned up to a frequency that is destructive. And if it's continual, if it's just now and again, the human body, as I say, can counter it, especially if the human body can get to a higher frequency, I would think. But if you're at low frequency and then you're bombarded with more low frequency, whether it be through negative vibrations of any sort, that is a destructive thing. And then that also is a bad mindset too. So then the mind and the frequency of the emotions and the feelings also come down. So it is a catch-22. And that's a situation that most humans are in. But most humans, I would say, are in it just guessing, due to circumstances and due to how this World War III is going. Because it's monitored, and there again it will depend on what situation you are in. If you are isolated and leave yourself open and you are surrounded by psychopaths and negative people who have the potential to operate technical machinery that can give out a negative vibration. Now, and then if you are a collective of this sort, in other words, if you have psychopaths that are combined, whether it be, or how should I say, like if you're doing a joint project, if you were, like if you had every car on the road beeping their horn, you have a few with road rage, right? You have a few psychopaths. But what if you have all of them that are infected like that? If the mind parasites get into all of them? What if they do it consciously or unconsciously? If they do it consciously, you're in big trouble, because, in other words, like if you had a gang of bike riders, and they're all of a negative frequency, and they're all going to use their motorbikes riding around in a very aggressive, loud manner, and intimidating, in other words, negative in every possible way, that they can use just a bike as, like in the movie Duel, as a weapon. Now, if you got enough of those, if there was a very large gang, for instance, and if they had a particular belief, and then if they think that you have a different belief, or that they don't like you for whatever reason, whether they are told to have that you have a different belief, because you can set up animosity between people quite quickly. A person only has to gossip about someone, don't they? Like I could go and gossip to someone, maybe. Well, maybe I can't because I don't gossip and don't tend to know too many people, and I am a live and let live person, always have been. But most people are not like that. Most people want you to be like them, just as the psychopath and the narcissistic personality, psychopathic person wants you to be like them. They don't want you to be what you are. They want you to be the same as them and less than them, really, even. And they are already usually a lot less than a real human because they don't particularly want to do high vibrational things. They don't particularly want to create, and they don't like it if they see someone else doing something better than them. They don't think that it betters the world. They don't know that they are working for the matrix. They don't know that when they bring down a high frequency human being, because most of them are probably still human beings, I guess. I don't know this, of course. There could be other forces operating. There could be, we could have different species. We could have different, like I said, different Barbie dolls, different types of dolls, different men. Look, we could have this situation because the thing is that without getting too convoluted, and I'm convoluted even for myself, to be honest, but like you could have a situation really like where, how should I put it, like even if you don't believe, the fairy tales that I say, and you don't have to because they are fairy tales. Like if you don't believe, like some people, like I went along this line before, and these are things that I've only had to consider over the last 12 months. I mean, I just believe in living life, really. I don't think that it matters. Like in many ways, I really do think, as I've said before, if you're just a reasonably frequency human being living in a world and the world is halfway normal, almost don't have to know anything. You don't even have to know even the basics of things because you'll probably survive this world and then get out of it because of that alone, I would guess. But that isn't the situation we live in. So you do have to be aware, and yet we're completely not aware. It's as simple as that. But like I say, if it's just all about frequency, but frequency and vibration, but we as humans don't know just this simple thing. We don't know how it operates. I know when it's used against me, and I can see it at an emotional, at a physical, and at a psychological level daily. Those three things. Most people will only be hit with probably one of those things. If you're in a particular circumstances, or for whatever reason, the matrix sees that they can bring the frequency down, or thinks there is potential for a ripple, or whatever is going on. I don't know because I don't understand. Sometimes it's just opportunity, sometimes it could be potential tidal waves. Who knows? I don't know. I can't answer that myself. I don't have enough information, even from my own standpoint. I know and I see things and I presume certain things, but I'm not going to put them into the video because I don't know them to be, they won't be a fact to you, even if I think they're a kind of fact. But either way, and I like to keep it simple because I think that, like I say, underneath it all, it is simple. It's just being convoluted because if you are dealing with a psychopathic mind, the name of their game is mainly confusion. Even at just a psychological level, they're like, this person knows what is real. This person knows, a real human being knows what is rational. But hey, if we can really mix it up, we concentrate enough, we may not be at their level, even at a psychological level. But we know enough. We understand how human beings function. We know how to get to people. We will focus solely on that one person, 24/7. We'll know their weaknesses. We'll know their strivings. And we know the world is a mess because we've helped create it. So we will be able to manipulate and maneuver and control something that is superior to us. But we will get the upper hand, and they will. And if there's more of them, if they combine, then you will have a real upper hand situation, because it is hard enough for one individual human being to actually keep their head above water if they're dealing with a master psychopath, because there's no rationale and there's no limit that psychopathic mind will not go to. And also, if you're not 100% aware that you're dealing with that until it's too late, sometimes, most of the time, and sometimes you even have to deal with them. What if you have to do? What if they're part of your family? Do you just get rid of your family? What if they're your dog and you don't believe in deserting animals? Even if you know the animal is possessed. It's just not in your nature. You can't do it. It's almost like an unwritten law in your psyche. The Matrix knows all these things, and exploits them. And creates distress by it too, because even knowing it, that creates that predicament. You're in a dilemma. You're like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And even that's only a minor thing, because then if the Matrix is hitting you at other angles as well, every angle. See, if you can just deal with one... See, that's what I think happened with myself without getting personal. I come to the conclusions that I knew I was dealing with a world of psychopaths. But I thought the number was more limited than what it is. But even allowing for that, I was like, oh, well, look, if there's 20% psychopaths, 25%, I actually come to that conclusion that it was 25%. But of course, that will vary from area to area. But from my own personal experience, I had rarely encountered anyone that wasn't. Now, of course, they're attracted to those they can attack easily. Like if you're a people pleaser, they're like, oh, this is definitely something they will go for, because they know that even if you disagree with them, you'll find it hard to refuse them, because they see you as a weak people pleaser, and you are too, to be honest. But that's only because you think that it doesn't hurt to do that sometimes, because you want to see them a bit happy and you don't want to rock the boat. You're not particularly, you're trying to be a little bit too. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Like I'm saying, it's not like Snow White where it was all innocence and just a pure high-spirited being. Sometimes it is just doing it like myself, just to keep the peace, not agreeing with it at all, and not even particularly caring if they're happy. It's more like, oh, I know this person will cause a problem. They're a little bit tougher than me, so I'll appease them just to keep the peace so that they go away almost. Of course, you don't get them to go away by that. You're just setting yourself up to where they know that they can do it time and time again. But either way, that's even if it's in a situation where you're not really personally involved with them. That'd be like if it was just someone down the street or something, because then theoretically speaking, you might not have to deal with them on a daily basis. They might not bother you again for another 6 months or whatever. But essentially, I've gone off the track here, but it's not just clearing the thoughts, it's clearing my head, because it feels like as though I've got half a head, That's exactly how the Matrix wants you to be. They don't want you to be a full mind, a full human being. They don't want you to be at full capacity mentally, psychologically and physically, which I could have been. And this is why I know about the Matrix, because I was on that path. I was nearly already there at many points. At physical level, I was really good at one point. All I had to then was the realisation of the psychopath that was 25%, I thought. I thought, hey, now that I know it, I can just be more careful when I'm dealing with people. And I thought, by and large, I've still got, I've still got more of a majority that are normal people. They may or may not like me. They may or may not be a benefit to me. But they're normal people. They're not going to wish me any harm. My attitude was simply, hey, I just want to live in a world I don't particularly need a lot of love. I just want a world where people are not deliberately trying to destroy me. Is that asking too much? And yes, it is, because we're in a matrix. Because psychopaths and matrix gods, they don't care about, they're not interested in love. They're not interested if you don't dislike them. They're like, we just don't like you. You represent something that we don't like. You represent a bad memory. Yes, go back to the garden. You fuel our resentment. You fuel our envy. You fuel our bitterness. You have been part, even though you personally have done nothing, you are part of, they live in the past. That's another thing about psychopaths. Have you ever known them? They live completely in the past, 100%. Like if something happened, I've known them. They talk about things that happened 50 years ago as though it happened yesterday. They never forgive or forget anything. Never. They expect you to forgive and forget everything, and you usually do. But they forgive nothing. You could do the smallest thing and that will be blown out of all proportion in their mind. They will be the victim. You will be the enemy. You will be the wrongdoer. You'll be the scapegoat, literally, for every wrong thing they do. You will be the scapegoat. I have experienced that. Every wrong thing they've done, they put onto you. Even if you're trying to appease them and keep the peace, placate them and help them. They don't want you to help them. They do want you to help them, but they resent it if you have any power, if you even can help them. So your help will be treated with disdain, secretly. They may not always expose it. At some point they probably will. And they will twist everything around because their mind is not clear thinking. You know how I make up fairy tales here? Their whole life is a fairy tale. Every single scenario is a fairy tale. They invent it. They have a few facts, a few semblance with reality, and the rest they embellish. And, in other words, they lie, but they believe their own lies. That's why psychopaths can pass lie detectors. Because they lie 24/7, 100%. But they believe their own lies. To them, they're not lying. That's why they're so hard, not only to help. If you were like thinking, oh, there's someone close to you, and you can see that they are sabotaging themselves and you, but you can't because they believe their own lies. They just embellish it all in their own head, in their own actual mind. This is the iniquity. It is a mental thing. It is a total mental, negative mental mindset that's took over their mind. They make up their own fantasy world. There's no real reality. They are psychopathic. They are completely psychotic is the word. They will say you're psychotic when you say something rational. When you say, well, this is what happened. I'm very, very sorry. This is the real reality. And that will be how the events panned out. But they'll say, no, that isn't how it happened. And they will actually believe it in their own mind because they can't accept they actually can't accept their own evil. They kind of know they do it. But it's so bad that even they have to twist it in their own head. Now, whether they're actually conscious or not of this, I'm not even sure about that, to be honest. Sometimes I actually think either that or I think their God entity probably is, because this is this is a being that knows everything and sees much more. So then it is a real, and because it's a game Earth, it's probably a different thing. But it's still the same in the sense that never at any stage has this being ever said, hey, I created my own negative situation. I brought on most of the catastrophes. It was my resentment, my jealousy of things that I had no right to have. Like, do you have a right to break up Adam and Eve? They are a species. Adam and Eve were a species, a human spirit species. They belong together. Eve was not meant to go with another being that was a different species because it wasn't compatible, it wasn't practical, it wasn't logical, it was not beneficial. It would destroy her. A lion doesn't mate with an elephant. It just doesn't work. It's impractical at the very least. Most don't want to. A lion doesn't even like an elephant. A lion would kill an elephant and does try to in the wild. Am I making any sense here? I'm trying to find examples, but you know what I'm saying? But this being, then twists it around. And this is what the world is. It's like the illogical logic. Like, oh well, Eve liked me. Eve liked me more than Adam. That's why she went with me. And, what right does the Creator say that a lion can't mate with an elephant? What right? Sure, it's not practical. And sure, one of us will get hurt. Sure, there's no point to it. Sure, it's illogical. It's not sensible in any way. Yes, it is psychotic. Yes, it is insane. But no, why shouldn't I? My Creator is trying to hinder me. My Creator is limiting me, stopping me from killing myself, from throwing myself off the cliff. But no, that is restricting me. I want freedom. I want to be able to throw myself off the cliff. I want to be able to destroy myself. I want to be able to destroy the other species. No, I do have that right. I was given free will, after all, of course, and this is it. But I would say that logically speaking, if this scenario is remotely true, and even at a fairy tale moral kind of lesson level, which is the whole point of it really anyway, which is the point of most fairy tales and fables, they have a moral or a lesson or something to be taught. It's not meant to be taken literally. But you can take it literally if you want to, because I think it's a very interesting world. I think it's, what we don't know. There's some truth to the fairy tales, there's some truth to the mystical kind of, like Alice in Wonderland, there's some truth in it. There's even some truth to the practicalities to it, even though it seems like, through the looking glass magic. But, it still could have a practical level. It's just that we don't understand how material things work even, because we don't understand that we create reality with our thinking. So we don't think that, and because we can't do it right in front of us anymore, because we are limited and because we have so many negative forces against us, it's a bit like a magician. If you know you're a magician, there's two ways of being a magician. You could be a real magician that could theoretically manipulate, I don't know what I'm talking about here, as you know, so I'm making it up, but I really don't know what I'm talking about. But supposing you could manipulate the actual atoms or the molecules or whatever it is that supposedly makes up this world, because I don't know, I'm not of that, I'm not educated, I'm not a scientist. I don't understand even basic science stuff, never did science. Never looked into it. Okay, so forgive me if I'm talking over my head, and I am, so I'm talking in concepts then. But supposing you could just do that, because some probably can. Science can do it. Even science can do it. We know that. So, that's just what we know. Supposing you could be a real magician and manipulate particles with your thinking. And actually you can do it with vibration, can't you? Because I saw it on a thing not long ago where if you can sing at a certain pitch, with a voice, it can actually break a glass. I'm not sure if this is true, but that's what they've shown anyway, so I'm going with it. But it's all frequency vibration. Its sound is vibration, and if that's true, but I think this is true anyway. So, but at any rate, if you could actually do that, that would be like what I'm trying to say. That would be like a proper natural magician. That's a real magician or a real magic person. But then there are other magicians who do it by sleight of hand. That's more of a technical magician, I think. It's a different means anyway, isn't it? It's deception. It's deception masquerading as real magic. It's a different type of magic, isn't it? It's maybe not even, it's probably not really magic if you compare the two. But it has the same result, or it appears to be the same. I don't think I'm making any sense here. I haven't got the right examples, and I don't fully know what I'm getting at even. I think I'll leave it here, I think, because I was going to go back to the garden, but either way, as you can see with the garden and that storyline as a fairy tale, that and seeing the smaller versions of the matrix or the God entity and its minions, etc., and the minions go down in kind of like, I would say, I was about to say like a step pyramid, but it's kind of like that, because the old step pyramid where you have the different levels, and you do have that in this world, don't you? Because you have like you have the matrix, or you have even if you say we have a natural earth. Yeah, if you think it's what you think it is or what you're told it is, and that there's no matrix, we're not in a confined space, we're floating around in space and all that. You can still do that if you want to. I think it kind of defies what I see now, just in a reality way. But I don't know that, because I can't see beyond it. But I sense, and if I'm told something, and if I look and then say, well, that makes more sense than anything else, because I'm not just going to, hear something